You're listening to the New Story podcast from New Story Church in Kansas City. To learn more about New Story Church, visit our website at www.newstory.church.
Welcome, everybody, to the Equip Podcast, where we're equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. My name is Jeremy. I usually host these, and today I don't have my normal co-host with me. I have someone different. It's a special episode. Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, so Kristen Maxwell here. I'm the Associate Director at Mission Adelante, and member here at New Story. I've been hanging around since about 2017, hiding in the background, avoiding people.
You tried.
I tried really hard.
Oh, you did.
I
you
was
successfully
pretty successful.
did for a while. I didn't even know who you were, really, until after your sister's funeral. That's when I was like, oh, Kristen, where did she come from?
Yes, I mean, I kind of intentionally hid. For a season. I've been a part of a church plant that had ended in a different part of KCK, and then was looking for a church when Tiffany passed, and New Story was really the church to my family during that time. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll use my gifts here.
And you have a tendency to not just dip your toe in.
No, that's not
so
my personality.
what do you do around New Story, in case anyone does not know?
Well, I get to be the friendly neighborhood announcements person a lot of Sundays. I help out with our middle school, high school girls and students. And then I am on the pastoral advisory team.
Keep going.
And I also serve as our events deacon, which really means that I help facilitate birthday parties, event rentals, funerals, wedding-ish, sort of a-ish. We haven't had anyone outside the church rent for that, but mostly folks outside of our church that are looking to use our building. So,
Cool. You wear a lot of hats.
I do,
and I'm thankful for that.
Very
thankful for that. You're super gifted in administration and attention to detail. I remember when you first started helping with students. I had mentioned we were looking at doing the city mission thing. We're gonna do an in city. This was before stuff really changed around here. Okay, we were gonna do that, and you within 2 hours, you're like, here's a whole freaking plan for the whole thing. And I'm like, I love you. Thank you so much.
That is how my brain works. You tell me, oh, here's what we need. I'm like, great, here's a plan.
I'm not that way at all. So everybody needs somebody like Kristen in their lives. That is for sure. But the reason to have you on today is there's some stuff that has changed a lot recently. Obviously, the new administration coming in, and that affects what you do, a lot of what you do. And excuse me, if you listened to our last episode, you heard us me and Pierce talk about this a little bit, shared a video that Jared Meeks, executive director, had talked about or had put out, really explaining the need that you guys have. So we'll talk about that a little bit more now. But can you go a little bit more detail on what it is you do at Mission Adelante?
Yeah. So I have been back with Mission Adelante for just a little bit, about a year and a half now. I previously worked there from 2010 to 2017. I have a long history serving refugees. I met my first refugee family in 2006, which makes me feel really old because it's almost 20 years ago now. And I was working at a church in Atlanta as a youth and kids ministry intern, and someone from World Relief, who is our kind of sponsoring organization with refugees, but they are associated with the National Association of Evangelicals, have a long history of welcoming refugees into the United States, came to us and was like, hey, we have this family, we think you should meet them. And I went with my boss, who's the kids minister at the time, and he and I went over and met this family and had Tang, the orange drink.
Okay, I was about to say, is that the Tang I know, or is that some other foreign?
Okay, Tang orange drink and grapes on a gold platter, and got to know this family and their kids, and they started coming to our kids ministry programs, and that was my first introduction to the refugee community. And then when I came back home to Kansas City, I purposely sought out like, okay, where are the refugees in Kansas City?
Yeah.
And started working at a school that had a couple of refugee kiddos at it, and then got involved at Mission Adelante as a volunteer, and then ran their youth and kids programs for specifically Bhutanese, Nepali refugees for 7 years. And it was really cool. Had a whole kids ministry of Hindu and Buddhist kids learning the Bible.
Wow.
Stranger things have happened, I guess, but
That's really cool.
It was a beautiful season. And so, Jarrett called me up. I was actually in the building when I got the phone call from him. We were hosting our friends from Single Mom KC.
Oh, you were here?
I was here.
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
I was cooking lasagnas for their dinner.
Nice.
And he calls me and wants to talk. I'd taken the afternoon off work for that. And he's like, hey, what do you think about the idea of bringing more refugees to Kansas City? What would be the challenges? And
Sounds all right.
I told him the challenges,
Yeah.
and he was like, okay, what would be the benefits? And so I told him the benefits, and he's like, great, do you want to lead it? And I said, I need a couple days to think on that. And so, that started the journey back with Mission Adelante. Just a little bit like clarification out of the gate, like, refugee is a loaded word.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
context.
what's the difference between a refugee and maybe someone seeking asylum or just immigrant in general?
So there are as many like statuses for immigration as there are people. Like if you talk to someone about like what their journey was to becoming a U.S. citizen, you're going to hear so many different answers. You're going to hear folks that came here as small kids that maybe are DACA recipients. You're going to hear from folks that came here on a work visa, on a student visa. I was talking to Sean last night about the journey they've had with their son-in-law.
Our other PAT members.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Context.
You're good.
About the journey they've had with their son-in-law and his immigration journey. And so for as many different people as there are that many different statuses and ways to come to the U.S. And so refugees in particular are kind of a unique subset in that you are declared a refugee. Like you don't just get to walk up to someone and say, hi, I think I'm a refugee. The UN, so the United Nations High Commission of Refugees, has a definition of what it means to be a refugee. And it means...
That's helpful.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Okay. So a refugee, and I'll just read like verbatim from them.
She's got notes.
I do have notes.
Nice.
A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, or political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. They cannot return home for fear of death or persecution.
Wow.
And so, like, when I talk to a lot of different folks about this, and like, a lot of times I don't have much time to explain myself. And so in the most simplified version, to become a refugee, someone has to want you dead.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible simplification, but it's just the reality.
It is.
And so if you are given refugee status, that means there is a well-founded fear for your life. To gain refugee status and admittance to the United States, the average wait time is about 3 years. You start out by first kind of presenting yourself to the UN and saying, hey, I think I might have a case based on their outline of like, hey, this is what makes a refugee. So you come and you're saying, hey, they want, these people want my whole people group dead. For example, we've had a lot of recent arrivals that have come from parts of Asia where Christians are persecuted.
Wow.
And so we have whole people groups that have been given refugee designation, a lot of times either because of their ethnic background or because of their faith.
So there's some of our very legitimate like Christian brothers and sisters that are refugees. Yeah.
And so it's interesting, this past fiscal year, or this past calendar year, Mission Adelante welcomed 171 individuals into the United States. And I would say probably 130 of them are like, around 130 of them are like dedicated Jesus followers. Like one of the first questions we get is, where can I find a church? Which is beautiful because that community actually helps them so much more than our organization could. Finding folks that have maybe walked the path before you or help you understand the cultural interchange is the neatest thing. And so once a refugee is given refugee status, by the UN. Then they're referred to one of many countries. So the United States is not the only country that welcomes refugees.
Okay.
We do have one of the longest standing refugee resettlement programs. And so refugees have been welcomed in the United States since the conclusion of World War II. Yeah.
Dang. Okay, so it's been a while. That's been going on. All
and
right.
so it in about the late 1940s, 1950s, they started welcoming folks that were displaced by the Nazis in Germany into the United States. And that kind of took a couple different iterations. I've also written many papers on this lately, so I'm going to nerd out.
That's fine. That's fine. So we're here.
But it took a couple different iterations. It was called by a couple different things from about 1948 into about 1980, where the refugee resettlement program was targeted more at specific people groups. So it was folks fleeing Germany for a while, and then we went into folks fleeing Hungary, folks fleeing Cuba, and folks fleeing Vietnam. And then in about 1980, I believe it was Jimmy Carter set the stage for what is our modern day resettlement program.
Got it.
And so we have a long history of welcoming folks in a pretty similar manner. And so once someone is referred for resettlement in the United States, the first thing they do is that they are have a security screening. They have to prove who they are, where they've lived, who they're in connection to, any groups that they might be in conjunction with. There's a biometric screening in terms of fingerprinting, iris scanning. I mean, it's super in depth because
it's not people just hopping on a plane and flying
there's
over.
No sneaking into it. So once you've hit that, then you're referred to next. Once they've proven who you are, that you're safe, then you're referred to an in-person interview with someone from Homeland Security. And you go
now, is that person over where they are?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So there's in countries, there are what are called refugee processing centers.
Got it.
And that's where someone from Homeland Security meets with the person that is seeking resettlement in the United States, and they go through the laundry list.
That'd be a hard job. That'd be a hard job.
Of questions to ensure they are who they say they are, that they've had the problems that they've said they've had, and that they are going to be a good fit to come to the United States. After that, their profile is sent on to the Department of Homeland Security, who then does another extensive background check, making sure they are who they say they are. They have no bad connections that are going to be damaging. From there, they go on to medical screenings where they make sure that they're physically able to travel, that there's no underlying conditions that could make it dangerous for them or the people around them. For example, tuberculosis screenings is a big one. And sometimes that prevents people from traveling because when you're living in a refugee camp in close proximity to other people, tuberculosis is a disease that spreads. And so they will then do medical screenings and make sure everything's all clear. And then they match them with an agency stateside. And so there are 10 presently, nonprofit organizations that partner with the refugee resettlement program to welcome folks here. Most of us have a faith-based background. And so our partner at the federal level or at the national level is World Relief, like I mentioned earlier. But there's Lutheran Family Services, there's Church World Services. Almost all of them have a background in Christian faith. There is a Jewish organization, I believe, and a couple other ones. They pop in and out depending on seasons, but they're matched with a U.S. agency. And then what happens then is they go through and they're like, okay, who can support this family? Where could they go? Do they know anyone in the States? So for example, we get a lot of cases that are called U.S. tie cases, which means someone from their family or community is already living here in Kansas City.
Got it. Okay.
And so it's a really beautiful thing. We had a case that came from Vietnam, I guess it was in November, that they had been separated for 20 years.
And so you're reuniting
families.
We're
reuniting families. Cool. And it's beautiful. It's not uncommon for us to have, when we welcome a family at the airport, if they're got family here, there'll be 30 people at the airport just hanging out.
Oh, I bet it's awesome to see, though.
Beautiful. One of the most beautiful ones I have seen was a father who had been separated from his wife and kids for 2 years. And I am not an easy crier. And
that'll get you.
I was crying.
That'll get you easy.
It was like one of the more beautiful moments I have gotten to see in my career.
That you help facilitate.
Yes.
That's
So
even more like,
yeah. So we get client information and we find somewhere for them to stay. We find
here
in Kansas City. Yep. And so we are lucky that we have 2 guest houses at Mission Adelante. So we're able to have folks stay in them temporarily while we look at finding a permanent place. And then
just like one single family home until you can. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of our folks end up in apartments. We've got some great partners that we're able to help lease apartments for folks. And then they start the business of settling in the U.S. And so that means they have further medical screenings, have to do more paperwork to, when you are an immigrant and not a naturalized citizen, you have to continually tell the Immigration and Customs Enforcement like where you live. And so like every time you move, you have to fill out more paperwork. There's fines if you don't. So like helping teach them that system. Refugees are legal permanent residents. That's one thing that our country has offered to them, and that we're inviting them in with a pathway to citizenship, because most of these folks have not had citizenship anywhere where they've been before. Because a lot of them are displaced in third countries. They're not a citizen there. And so when I worked with the Nepali Bhutanese for so long, it was beautiful because there was a whole generation that grew up in the camps there.
Wow.
And so when they came to the U.S. and set up life here, the naturalization ceremonies are the coolest thing ever because you've got, older women that are like, I've never been a citizen anywhere before. And suddenly they have this
powerful
belonging. So that's, one of my favorite parts of what we do. But when they come, we get them set up in housing, get the kids enrolled to school, get medical appointments started. Everyone, if they need English classes, they get plugged into English classes right away. And then they meet with our employment specialist. Most of our families have at least one person working full time, if not 2, within about 4 months. And so that is one of the things that absolutely blows my mind. I'm like, if you drop me down in the middle of Asia and said, hey, Kristen, you are going to not recognize the language, not recognize the culture, but you're going to expect it to pay your rent in 3 months. Go. That would absolutely blow my mind. And so, it's a real quick path to self-sufficiency, which is the goal. Clients start paying their own bills, again, like 3 months out.
Wow. And
then they also are required to start paying back the travel loan. So the plane ticket that got them here.
Oh, I didn't know they paid that back. Okay.
Yeah. 6 months in, you get a bill from the agency or the organization that brought you. So our clients get a bill from World Relief with a monthly payment amount. And it's just like any bill. And so if they don't pay it, it gets taken to collections.
Is it? Jeez. Welcome to America.
Yep.
Is it based off of like their do they base the payment off of like what their income is at the time? Like if they get a job that's a good paying or not as high paying?
I mean, you can pay more. And then if you like for some reason, like, we've had a couple of folks that have gotten seasonal jobs like landscaping or things like that. Like if it's a down month, they can request, a break on payments for a month.
That could be rough, man.
Yeah.
You get here and you and your family of 5 come over, and 3 months after you get here, you're like $7,000 check.
Yeah.
You got to pay that back. Like,
it is a payment plan.
Yeah.
But it's still it's
a big number when
to
you're
think
new.
about. Yeah. Especially, families where it's like mom, dad, 3, 4 kids, all of a sudden that adds up real quick.
Yeah.
Because most of our cases come from the other side of the world. Yeah. So it's not exactly cheap to get between point A and point B.
Yeah. So a family goes to the UN, or someone goes to the UN and says, I think I have a case for why I should be displaced to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Say they're like, yeah, we agree with you.
Yeah.
Where do they go then?
Yeah. So it really depends on the region they're
in the intermediate time, I'm saying.
So depending on where they're coming from, they may end up in a refugee camp. They may end up
in another country.
In another country, yeah.
Got it.
So refugees, you cannot apply for resettlement if you're in your country of origin. You have to have sought refuge in another country.
Got it.
And so, so for example, if they're coming from Myanmar, they might be in Thailand. Gotcha. Our folks that have come out of Eritrea are coming to us from Ethiopia. We've got folks that have come to us from Nicaragua that come through Costa Rica. And so, Yeah, you can't come from your own country directly to the United States. You have to have been somewhere else for a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. No, and I can trying to, for anyone listening, I'm trying to put myself in this. Like, imagine someone was threatening my life, me and my wife's life, and they're going to come after us, and or just Christians, and we'll just say that Christians in general for some weird reason. Going and like the fear it's feeling, just like, this is my last resort of like going.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be my first thing is to run to the UN. It'd be like a last resort to go to the UN, and then I'm having to run to another area or another country just to like have to run to Canada and set up in a camp that's not my home, that I don't know where it is, and then I'm just then at the mercy of the system to hopefully place me somewhere. And then I get flown over. Like the day comes a couple years, 2-3 years later, potentially, I get flown over. I get dropped in Kansas City.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Where we have winter.
Yeah, where we have winter. I'm here for 3 weeks, and then the whole climate of the United States changes.
Yeah.
Not temperature.
No.
Can you explain what's happened since January 20th?
Yeah. So, refugee resettlement as a program nationwide was not ignorant to the fact that our understanding of our jobs, our understanding of our systems would most likely change under the new Trump administration. Yeah. It was something we had kind of looked at. Okay, what is past precedence? Like the industry as a whole has weathered this administration before
since the 40s.
And so what can we look towards as what will happen? And we were not prepared for what has happened, so we kind of figured our numbers would drop off.
Numbers as far as
number of arrivals.
Got it.
So each year the president sets what's called the refugee ceiling. And that number is set with a lot of background work that most folks aren't aware of.
It's not just arbitrarily thrown out there.
It's not just like, hey,
1,000.
I think we can fit this many people in our country. It's every agency on the ground. So in Kansas City, operating refugee resettlement-wise, there's Mission Adelante, Lam, Jewish Vocational Services, and Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas. We all operate resettlement agencies, 2 on the Missouri side, 2 on the Kansas side. And before that number can be set, we have to go to we get directives from the state refugee office that says, okay, you need to come up with a number for this next year of how many people you think the community can handle and how many people your agency can handle. And so the director of Catholic Charities and I went and we talked with 8 different community agencies, the police, the Wyandotte County government, the school, KCK public school system, all of those folks, Department of Children and Families, and said, hey, here's the number we're thinking for the year that it would come to KCK.
Yeah. Say just throw out like 100. I don't know what your number was. Like,
so our number for Mission Adelante was 115 folks.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what Catholic Charities was.
You're saying, hey, we feel like we can help resettle 115 people.
People, not cases, people, and help them to reach self-sufficiency and figuring out life in Kansas City.
And each of those other 4 organizations had their own number.
Has their own number,
and they're doing the same thing you're doing.
Yep. Okay. And so like the director of Catholic Charities and I would go together because we were talking to a lot of the same people. And got feedback from all of them, and all of them were like, yeah, that seems manageable. That seems within the realm of what we can do. We got a little pushback from the school district. They're like, okay, just let us know what languages, we want to make sure we can support. But they didn't say no. They just said, hey, we, keep us in the loop. Yeah. And so, we had to go to all of that, and then we proposed that number. That number is then taken at the state level. The state then proposes it at the federal level, and then that's how the president decides the refugee ceiling number. Okay. And so this past year, our refugee ceiling was at 125,000 nationwide. Okay. We didn't reach that number. We hit about 100,000
in 2024.
In 2024, fiscal year 24, which is the highest number in recent history. They were higher than that under both George W. Bush and oh goodness,
Obama?
Nope. Further, Jimmy Carter. There we go.
Back,
I'm like way back further. So they were both higher under those administrations, but this was one of the more recent higher numbers of resettlement, and we expected that number to drop Like we were kind of like, okay, we'll figure out how that number can drop. We know we'll have to cut staff. We know we'll have to.
So like you're saying in 2025, we know that number is going to be less. Just
so
based on past precedents.
Yeah, our office was prepared to recognizing that like, this is going to wind down. And we thought it would be a gradual wind down. Our, the organizations we partner with that we get grant funding through are both, a federal partner and a state partner, and they both told us, they're like, we're pretty confident the way things have gone in the past, like we'll be able to serve the people we have. We don't know if we'll get more to come in. That might be a pause. That's fine. But, we're going to go ahead and set this contract with you for the fiscal year. Okay. Here's the funding you have to serve clients. Here's the funding you have to pay your staff. Let's go forward with that. And so we received 61 individuals in quarter one of fiscal year 25, which is October 1st through December 31st, and then an additional that included into a little bit into January. And so those folks, we pick them up at the airport. We promise that we're going to help them get settled. We're going to help them find a place to live. That initial resettlement, it's called reception and placement. And so we did those things, and have a per capita amount of money that we are given to help support that them. We don't give it directly to the clients. We spend it on their behalf to secure rent to get them started. And the challenge was that on right after Inauguration Day, they signed an executive order to reorganize the reception and placement system within the United States. Which again was kind of on track with what we were expecting. But then we got a stop work order that was passed down last Friday. So I believe that was the 24th. And that froze all funds that were dedicated to these folks, along with froze the money that we had earmarked for staff. And we operate on a reimbursement system. And so we spend the money and then ask our parent organization to reimburse us once they're reimbursed from the government. And the government froze that money. But the 61 people that are here are still here. And they still have needs. And
when was the last family arrival?
The 18th. So we had a mom and her, a single mom and her 6 kids come in on the 18th. We picked them up from the airport, got them settled in one of our guest houses, started making plans for moving them into permanent housing, getting the kiddos in school, getting, some of the woman's children are of working age. So starting looking at even like, okay, what jobs, where can we start connecting you? And then this order came down saying, hey, don't spend any more money.
And then, a week after they get here, rug pull,
100%. And so our it was rough. I got an email from our home office on Friday afternoon at 4:30 that said emergency mandatory meeting. And I actually sent a text message to our program officer that kind of monitors our grant, because if you've never worked under a federal grant, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of continual monitoring and auditing to make sure your funds are being used in the way you say you're using them. And so I messaged our program officer with World Relief, and I was like, hey, is this spam? Because it was from someone I'd never met before. Probably because they were like second or third in charge of the whole organization, which is why I'd never met them before. And I sent her a message, and then about 5 minutes after that, I got an email from one of my direct contacts that said, no, we need you on this call. And we got notice that the entire reception placement program for the entire country had been shuttered. And
so we're just talking about 60 some families, and some maybe past that 90-day mark.
The 60 are still in the 90 days.
60. So, okay. So you have 60, how many families?
About 20 families.
Okay. 20 families, 60 some people.
60 people. Yeah.
Yeah. 20 some families that are here within that window, and they're just dropped. And figure it out type thing.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's just you guys.
That's just us. Yeah.
There's 3 other organizations in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And
Countless
dozens and
more.
dozens and dozens and dozens
around
more
the
throughout
country.
the country.
Yeah. And so, so we at Mission Adelante are really lucky. We have about 30 church partners throughout the Kansas City area, plus more volunteers and donors than we can even begin to count.
Yeah.
And so once we got off the call, we immediately, Jarrett and I, who was our executive director, got on the phone with each other and we're like, okay, what does this mean? What does this look like? And plans started to take shape as to, first and foremost, make sure that everyone had somewhere safe to stay.
Yeah.
Everyone had clothes to wear, and everyone had food to eat. A lot of times when our clients come, they come with 1 suitcase per person, which I pack more for a weekend trip than these folks pack to start a new
their
life.
entire life. Yeah.
And so that was our first priority. And then figuring out how to keep staff to support folks, because these folks need to learn how to pay their rent and how to open a bank account and how to use their debit card at the grocery store to buy the groceries that they need. Some folks come with those skills, but if I've been in a refugee camp in a rural location, that's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so there's just some of those immediate needs that had to be met. So we started the Love Mercy campaign, but based on Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you? Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Truly trying to show mercy to these folks, because as far as the government was concerned, the money was turned off, so our services should be turned off.
Yeah.
And that's just not the ethos of who
tenable.
we are.
And that's not tenable because you have families here.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, one of the families is staying in our guest house, and it's like, it's a guest house. It's not a permanent solution. They're a family of 7 staying in a tiny 2-bedroom house. And it's good for now, but it's not good for forever. Also, I really don't want to be a long-term landlord.
Yeah. Understandable.
So we are working to currently raise funds to support the clients that we have here and meet their needs through at least their 90-day period. So helping with rent, helping with food, trying to figure out that stuff, and then also support our staff to wind the program down. These clients are not only clients, but they're dear friends to a lot of our staff. We get news of birthday parties that we're invited to. We're the first text message when there's a baby born.
Yeah.
We've become family to some of them. And so you don't want to abandon your family. No. So we're hoping to end things well, set our folks up to go forward, make sure they have community and touch points, and they know they can come back to Mission Adelante. It's just going to look a lot different going forward because the people that were their people may not be there.
Yeah. And the other aspect of this that's really hard is, this was just 20 families. You had a bunch more that were on their way, that flights got canceled. You can imagine being like, finally, we've been in this situation for years. We've been away from our home for years in this refugee camp, and now finally the day's coming. It's a week away. Yeah. Like, how stoked you get about vacation. Imagine like a new hope and new future, and then it's just pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah. That's been one of the hardest things of this past week is having clients come in or call in because they have family members that were on their way. The clients we've received since, I would say, mid-December, the average wait time, I think we figured, was 14 years to come to the United States.
Wow.
And we had a client that came, I guess, about a week and a half ago, whose sister was supposed to join her in March. and their brother was already here. He's been here for 5 years. He's a citizen, has naturalized, and he was the only one here, and he was waiting for the rest of his family. And one of his sisters came, and then the other one was scheduled to fly mid-March, and that flight got canceled, and they've been told, it'll be an indefinite amount of time before you can see your siblings. I'm glad he's got one sister here, but we're lamenting the other one.
The other sister that's now alone there.
Mm-hmm. So,
jeez.
Yeah, it's been a lot of feelings these past few weeks.
and I know that immigration is a hot button issue, especially for when we get into political discussions. There's, as you described, there's a big difference between refugee, someone seeking asylum, or even just standard immigration. This is very different. And when often what I hear from folks is, man, we just want people to go about this the right way.
Yeah.
Like, go about citizenship the right way. Don't be running across the board. Just do it the right way. This is the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the right way, and it got pulled out.
Yeah.
So we're not making big, broad political statements about any party, or anything like that. But this is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because no matter, this may be controversial, who knows? But no matter how people get here, if they're here, Christian, they're your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Your neighbor is not a geographical concept; it is a moral concept.
Yeah.
And no matter how they got here, they are now your neighbor.
Yeah.
And so this should break your heart.
Yeah.
And so this is why, like, right away I jumped on with, we wanted to put that out yesterday, and we'll put it out again today, about giving towards this Love Mercy campaign with Mission Adelante. And, because not only do you have people not able to live here, you have people, like many of people you work with that now don't have jobs.
Yeah. And that's been one of the heartbreaking components. And I think what's hard about immigration in particular is until you are in it, you don't realize like how complicated and how nuanced it is.
Yeah.
It is, sorry, I'm looking up a Bible verse.
You're fine.
But it's complicated and it's nuanced. There's not a straightforward thing. Even mentioning, the southern border, which I know I'm treading into risky territory, but like recent studies show that the vast majority of undocumented folks in our country actually didn't cross through the southern border.
Yeah.
They came in legal ways and overstayed visas.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's a whole different conversation. But when you mentioned our neighbor, we look back at the story of the Good Samaritan, and who was a neighbor to the man in that story? It was the one that stopped and helped.
Yeah.
It was the person that they didn't think should. They stopped and they helped. We look in Leviticus. We look at the commandments to take care of. Often throughout the text of Scripture, we see widows and orphans, but oftentimes paired with widows and orphans is also aliens. Taking care of the foreigner in your midst is welcoming God. And I think that is the challenge. And that is the thing that we have to put up next to what we hear and what we see. And again, I challenge folks to meet their neighbor and love their neighbor, regardless of how their neighbor got to be their neighbor. Yeah.
And it's, like I've talked about this stuff many, many times. It is an uncomfortable position to be in. Like, I don't necessarily fault the government for being the government.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean I have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
There's several things historically that the government has done that we would not condone, and some of it doesn't surprise us. Now, when somebody runs on a little bit more extreme immigration policy, they get voted in and they enact that. It's not terribly surprising. But as a Christian, it should bother us.
Yeah.
This type of thing should not be okay for a Christian to sit and listen to. And so, no matter how you feel about about immigration, no matter how you feel about the southern border. These people, we can't just pray for the nations out there and then board up our windows when they come to our streets.
Yeah.
The mission field comes to you, and now they're your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thankful for the work that you're doing, and even in the midst of crisis.
Yeah.
Literally, when I saw that stuff come down, you're the first person I thought of. When I saw those things go out, I'm like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
This is not going to be good. And unfortunately, you got the call later on that made it worse and just cease.
Yeah.
So this is one of those areas where it can be really hard to be a Christian first.
Yeah.
Because when the line of reasoning is people are here, they've overstayed a visa, or they've come across illegally, whatever it may be, they are criminals. When that is the line of reasoning, that can be really hard to square with. But I would encourage you to do a little bit more reading on what happens when you overstay a visa, that it's actually a misdemeanor. Mm-hmm. It's not a felony offense, but then you have other politicians pushing policies for
much more severe consequences.
Yes, like even SB 72, the Senate Bill 72 in Missouri, to set up bounty hunters.
Yeah. And
you can actually get a kickback
Yeah.
when you turn someone in, and it leads to an arrest of an illegal, someone who's here illegally.
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff. I understand drawing lines can be really hard when it comes to where are we in the wrong for hiding or for whatever. It doesn't matter. But I know that stuff can get really hard, but our responsibility as a Christian is to love our neighbor no matter who they are. Mm-hmm. And that may put us at odds with the government at time to time. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all I just keep blabbering on, but yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
I mean, when I think back, like Mission Adelante, we've been around we'll celebrate 20 years.
Wow.
In September. I know. And we were started because our founder had been a missionary. And when he was in Costa Rica for language school, someone there befriended him.
Wow.
And helped him not get taken advantage of, and helped him get from place to place and learn where to buy the bread and learn how much the taxi fare should cost him. And he and his wife both stopped and were like, man, we haven't done this for someone in our own city.
Wow.
And so the radical hospitality that they were shown there really spoke the faith of the people that were around them. And they wanted to extend that to their neighbors here when they returned to Kansas City. And so that's really a lot of what we stand on, is how do we love people from all places by serving them, sharing life, and sharing Jesus. So, yeah.
Well, Kristen, this has been super helpful information, and I hope it's helpful for other people just to understand what the refugee program actually looks like. And this is a tangible, real need directly in our community.
Yep.
So I'll link again to how you can support Mission Adelante, how you can give to Mission Adelante in this Love Mercy campaign.
Yeah.
I know that some people from our church are volunteering there next week, and our students are volunteering there in 2 weeks. So Mission Adelante is something near and dear to my heart. I'm thankful for all that they do, especially this refugee resettlement program, because you're actually helping when Jesus talks about her, telling the parable, and he says, whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me.
Yeah.
What have you done for the widow, the orphan, the vulnerable, the refugee, the immigrant? We're doing this for Jesus.
Yep.
So anyway, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. That is where we'll end. I want to thank you for joining us for the Equip podcast, where we're equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. Now, let's go do that.